Alan, it's good to talk to you. In fact, I think you were one of the first people in Las Vegas that I spoke with when this A's news broke early April, so glad we could connect again. And here we are, just about maybe a month away until baseball officially approves relocation for the A's to Southern Nevada. You're connected in the community, you're at Golden Knights games, you're at Raiders games. Is there a tangible buzz that you're feeling that Las Vegas is this close?
No, I don't know what more to say except no. There's just in terms of the everyday excitement that you would expect to have a new major league team come into your market, there really is no palpable interest or excitement that's swelling with, like you mentioned, the baseball owners scheduled to meet in Texas. They'll probably approve the move. And, keep in mind, in defense of, quote, the Las Vegas sports market, we do have the Vegas Golden Knights have just started up a new year.
Right.
As you know, the year after you win a world championship is usually high popularity for the team. So the Golden Knights are garnering a lot of the attention. The Las Vegas Aces are.
That's right. WNBA Finals.
They're fighting for a world championship. They have some injuries, but they play tonight. You mentioned the Raiders. They're always a presence, obviously. And then we have two major events that's kind of eclipsed the whole athletics move. One is obviously Formula One. A lot of people here in Las Vegas are upset about all the disruption and the traffic jams, and basically Clark County handing over the strip to the promoter and organizer of this event. There's been a lot of upset people on the local front. And then we have the Super Bowl, February 11th at Allegiant Stadium. So, the A's at one time, it was a hot topic when the legislation was being debated up in Carson City. But I got to tell you, Brody, it's been rather quiet on the athletics stadium front and the athletics move. And like you mentioned, the only newsworthy item that's going to crop up in the next month will be the owners' meeting in Texas.
And if that vote happens and if it does get approved officially from that regard, I mean, do you expect there to be, not a parade, but do you expect there to be a little bit more buzz, more of a moment, or is this is just how it's going to be?
You'll see some headlines, and there'll be news on the local TV stations. Basically, very straightforward news about, Major League Baseball owners approve the move of the Oakland Athletics franchise to Las Vegas. But I got to tell you, there just hasn't been a lot of chatter on the street that I've really heard of. Like I said, we have all these other things going on.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned that we had, the major leagues of golf was here. I guess one of the major leagues, PGA, was just here on this past weekend with the Shriners event in Summerlin. And we even had a NASCAR event this weekend. It went head to head with the Raiders game on Sunday. So I think, honestly, Brody, until you see movement at the Tropicana site, until you actually see the demolition of that site, of the buildings there, and some site preparation and construction equipment, I just don't think there's going to be a lot of interest. And it's not as though people are opposed to it or actively against it. It's kind of almost even more sad. It's almost just indifference toward it. I mean, there's just, it's kind of seen as just another tourism option that will be coming to the Strip, obviously in a very high profile location. But there's a couple observations. To this day, I still don't understand for the $1.1 billion that the owner will spend of his own private money, supposedly here in Las Vegas. I don't understand why he just doesn't spend the same amount of money building a new stadium in your market. I mean,
that's a whole different conversation.
In government assistance, that's on the table for a $1.5 billion baseball park. The expenses might even go up. We saw that with the Raiders Stadium. The Raiders wanted a few little extra perks and suites and clubs and this, and they spent a little extra money over the budget, and that was their responsibility. And the same will probably be with the Oakland Athletics baseball park. And the owner is spending a little more than $1.1 billion. If you look at the $380 million in government assistance, I don't understand why you just can't take that same money and build an open air stadium in your market. I don't understand that.
Well, a lot of people have not understood that for quite some time now. Going back to the Tropicana site, and I understand your point earlier, it's not tangible to Las Vegans yet, but when the Trop comes down, if that's the case, summer of next year, yeah, then maybe it becomes a little bit more real. On that note, I know you've been to that hotel, I'm sure many of times. You've lived in Las Vegas for a while, but I also know you've recently visited the site just to really get a grasp and a lay of the land all over again. I don't know if you've walked all nine acres of that parking lot, but can you visualize it when you're there, when you've been there recently, what they want to do?
Yeah, I walk the site and I just slowly it's the east side and the south side it's the southeast quadrant of that site roughly.
Right.
And, as I'm walking, I'm just walking my bicycle or just slowly, pedaling in that corner of that 36-acre overall location. I gotta say, it's hard to imagine a Major League Baseball stadium with a retractable roof shoehorned into that southeast quadrant of the site. And if you look at a lot of the drawings, and granted, I think the franchise said the drawings really don't have anything to do with reality,
That's
but
correct.
a lot of the drawings show how the stadium really spills across the entire corner there of Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard. So it will obviously be a very, very tight squeeze. And the one thing they do have going for it is that the land surrounding that quadrant of the site, I think Reno Avenue might be on the south side.
Yes.
And there's some land behind it. There is, it's not built up. It's not super dense back there. So they, will probably have to rent or use some of the land as a staging area for the equipment and such. But I'm going to be polite and just say it's going to be a very tight squeeze.
We're 1 month out, again, we think, from the earliest convenience that baseball could approve this. We don't have renderings. We don't have financing details. This team doesn't know where it's going to play for 2025, 2026, and 2027. But we've also seen how the A's operated with the Nevada legislature in May and June of this year, and they really took things to the last minute. They kind of forced the issue a little bit to go to the special session so that legislators could approve the public money. Do you really see this coming down to everything coming out, details, design, blueprints? We've selected a designer all last minute, and then it could all be approved, and Las Vegas is good with that?
Probably. And the answer to me, in my mind, is yes, because we have a track record. The track record is Las Vegas and Clark County and the state of Nevada and this market. It behaves as an outlier market, Brody. I mean, yeah. I've covered stadium and arena public-private deals in several different markets now, and this is not how it's typically done. And I've reached a point, especially after witnessing how the state legislature handled this particular bill and proposal, is that it's just running and gunning, and they're just going to do it their own way. There is no protocol. It's not what you would even quote unquote say traditional or even dare say good government behavior. It's going to be kind of a run and gun style, wing it on the fly style. And Las Vegas apparently is content with that. When I say Las Vegas, I mean pretty much the people. In a lot of big markets, you would typically see some kind of taxpayer watchdog organization. And there are a couple statewide groups here in Nevada, but, you would see some, I would say, outrage or disagreement besides just the isolated voices you hear sometimes about the whole concept of subsidizing stadiums. for very rich team owners. I mean, you have just some people who are just basically against that, and we heard some from those people during the debate. But the bottom line is you had some of those powerful unions here in favor.
Right.
You had the laborers union in favor, and you had the culinary union in favor. So
Right.
they combined forces with Democrats at the state legislature, and that was pretty much the done deal. I mean, that's typical behavior you don't see in a lot of different markets. But like I said, in answer to your question, Brody, Las Vegas is an outlier market, and
Hmm.
I've learned the hard way as a journalist. Journalists, we look at how things are traditionally done and
Right.
supposed to be done, and
Right.
you look at the protocol, and I don't think it was necessarily done in this particular case, especially the speed in which the legislature approved the deal. But our friend Jeremy Aguero had, I thought, the classic line of the entire legislative session when he told a lawmaker that, yeah, you're right, that, it doesn't make economic sense in every other market except Las Vegas. And that
Right.
was his whole point, that Las Vegas is just its own unique animal, and things are going to be done in this town that are not going to be typical that you see around the country in different markets.
I've got a Jeremy Aguero question coming for you later on, so hang tight for that.
Sure.
I want to bring up schools over stadiums. You mentioned the groups that obviously oppose the public money. They're the primary one. They need 102,000 signatures by this upcoming summer. Basically, they have 9 months to do it. And if this goes on a ballot for a referendum vote, those typically don't favor the cause that existed. Like referendum votes typically make something go away. It doesn't sound impossible to get that many signatures in that amount of time.
It's going to be
What do you make?
difficult. I think they need to get a certain number in all the congressional districts. I don't have the number off the top of my head, Brody, but
Four congressional districts. There's about, yeah, it's evenly split. It's 25,
right.
25. So to your point, that is also true.
But it'll be a challenge. As you know, there was the quote unquote lawsuit filed by two lobbyists. Kind of a weird little, it's no secret that one of the lobbyists is also a lobbyist for the local newspaper, and that was
Right.
not disclosed in the newspaper's story on the topic, which was a front page story on the lawsuit by the lobbyist, which I thought probably should have been disclosed. It's not a big deal.
Right. So
Um,
just the headline, though, was that the A's were suing schools over stadiums. One of their lobbyists was suing schools over stadiums. What do you make of that part of it?
yeah, I just now obviously that was a baseball team backed lawsuit in some way. I don't think these two plaintiffs just in isolation just thought that it was not a good democratic ideal to have this public referendum.
Yeah.
I think as a reader, not even as a journalist, I mean, just as a reader, I think it was safe to assume that the athletics were the driving force behind this lawsuit.
I mean, it's being taken seriously, I guess is the point, right? That the process could be greatly stalled if
Yeah, the
380
weird
goes
thing
away.
about the referendum is that the schools over stadiums folks wants to have, I believe, the vote um, uh, in a year from November. So it would be
Correct.
November 2024. And the athletics want to have the Tropicana demolished in the summer of
Right.
2024. So
Right.
it does bring in a very weird and awkward situation of demolishing a quite a bit of building space, only to have a vote
Right.
that could, theoretically kill the project. So
Yeah.
I guess that adds a little drama and awkwardness to the whole situation.
You mentioned earlier that it's a busy sports time in Las Vegas. F1 has their first Grand Prix in about a month from now. I know there's been a ton of construction, a ton of inconvenience. It's amazing how much I know now about the daily happenings of Las Vegas. I'm paying attention. But I also know that there were a lot of projections on that F1 weekend in November, too. And I just saw via the newspaper in Las Vegas that hotel room rates had gone down 70% from where they initially were. And let's be honest, they were dramatically inflated to begin with, but we're 1 month out and everybody was basing expectations off of predictions and projections. And a lot of those came from Jeremy Aguero of Applied Analysis, who also did a majority of the heavy lifting on projections for the A's ballpark here. Am I wrong to put those two things together right now?
Well, I've done several stories on Jeremy Aguero and his ability to be at the center of just about every major sports event and project in town, and the fact that because of the fact that he's kind of in the eye of this hurricane of sports development, that's inevitable. There's going to be some conflicts. He obviously had to he and his firm had to step down from the Las Vegas Stadium Authority because, well, Jeremy represented the Athletics that will be doing business before the Stadium Authority. It also brought up some other side conflicts of interest involving Steve Hill, who's the chairman of the stadium board, who joined Jeremy in representing the Athletics cause before the state legislature. It's a little messy there. But, Jeremy is involved in the whole topic of economic spending impact numbers. And as you know, Brody, those numbers can be used politically to justify public spending on these projects. So that's why, the media and the public have to take a very close look and talk to a wide variety of economists to get a handle on just the legitimacy and accuracy of these numbers. You'll often see TV stations and the media toss out these big $1.3 billion spending impacts with Formula One coming in and, all this money coming in with the Super Bowl. And these are really very difficult and tricky numbers to get a handle of because there's so many other factors at work. A couple factors that are not taken into consideration in these big numbers that are thrown out is, number one, the number of people who avoid the market and won't be coming to the market because they don't want to deal with the traffic congestion and some of the other logistical headaches that come with these big events. And, there are some businesses that will actually, lose money because they're not sports related. I think sports related businesses will do fine. But, if you're selling antique rugs or if you're selling any, other items that are not really sports related that have an impact by the event, you probably might see a drop in business. But that drop in business is not calculated into the big raw number that you see out there.
Right.
And like I said, I can't stress enough, the numbers have political potency. They're used to justify public expenditures. We saw that with Clark County. Clark County government. It'll be interesting to see if there's any political backlash about the F1 because the besides the traffic jams, I mean, they've taken the entire strip and have kind of redone it. They've made it into this big mini. I mean, the interesting thing about F1 is that it's not like a Super Bowl where you have the event at a venue.
Right.
The venue is the public street. It's
right.
the public right of way, and
right.
it's 3.8 miles of public right of way.
Right.
Much of which has been transformed into mini venues in the form of grandstands. And, unfortunately, we've already had the death of a construction worker by the Bellagio, which was a tragic situation several weeks. So, the economic impact numbers are always up for debate, and there's a lot of just upset locals who feel as though the ticket prices are very expensive. I just did a story, I think, last week about the fact that the F1 ticket prices are the most expensive of the Formula One circuit
Right.
around the world. So um, this one is going to be very visitor based. I mean, a lot of that was kind of one of the big incentives for the LVCVA, the publicly funded tourism agency here, to spend. They approved a $19.5 million aid package for 3 years to help the promoter on this. And again, the payback is quote unquote the rich international visitors who supposedly will be pumping money into the coffers of the hotel chains, the big hotel companies on the strip.
Sure. I mean, the parallels are all there between F1 and the A's. Something that existed already in the sporting realm that saw Las Vegas and said, hey, we want to come here and camp out, essentially. F1 is on a 10-year contract, which is also another question. I'm sure right now maybe there's even a little bit of remorse or animosity about
I
doing
love
this
the
every 10
point you made,
years.
Brody, because in some ways we already have forms of that sports entertainment in the form of the Oakland A's. We have their AAA team, which is kind
Right.
of funny. I mean, it's kind of ironic. The AAA team plays really as far away realistically as you can from the strip. They play in Summerlin,
Right.
which is 13 miles to the west. And ironically, that baseball park was built with $80 million worth of public money in the form of a naming rights deal,
Right.
which seems kind of strange to me. It's a local baseball park serving locals, and yet they received $80 million from the LVCVA in the form of a naming rights deal, which is why it's called Las Vegas Ballpark.
Right.
Why a publicly funded tourism agency needed to spend $80 million on a sports venue that serves locals is kind of a baffling situation to me. But my point is that we already had AAA baseball in this market. It's not the major leagues, but I know, I'm sure locals will go to A's games starting in 2028, assuming that this project does get realized.
I know you saw the comments that now former A's closer Trevor May made now a couple days ago. And really, from the player perspective, you just don't hear much. I'm curious what something like that coming out might impress upon people in Las Vegas when they hear that, when they see something like that. I mean, clearly in Northern California, it resonates among the fan base, his opinions and the way he put it. Does any of that have a ripple effect in Nevada?
Some, I think it was limited, but there was some. I think people did see it. I mean, I thought it was an astonishing speech. I mean, it
Yeah.
was raw, and it got down to the nitty gritty of just the visceral emotions, that are at play when a franchise gets up and moves, especially in this particular case when the benefits. I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, Major League Baseball will approve this because there's public money. I mean, $380 million of government assistance, and that's the bottom line, Brody.
Hmm.
If there was a government, I mean, I know Oakland did piece together a lot of infrastructure and transportation money, but if they just came out and said, ta-da, here's $400 million, boom, I mean, it might have been different. The fact is, Nevada they jump when Fisher said jump, and um, the speech was pretty amazing. It grabbed my attention, and it was the guy has a future, I guess, in media if he wants one. I mean, I thought it was pretty powerful words, but I mean, I think the impact obviously was much more profound in the Bay Area than it was here. Like I said, and we're just the timing of the speech was weird because we're just between the Golden Knights and the Aces and F1, the Super Bowl and the
Right.
Raiders, it's just not at the forefront of the average Las Vegas person right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, since I'm in the business,
Of
I
course.
was kind of blown away by the speech, and
Of course.
I was astonished by just the raw honesty of it.
You mentioned A's ownership, and John Fisher obviously has that majority title right now. Is it the expectation that in Las Vegas he would come there, keep that as owner of the team? Or is there a thought that there might be some local investors who also would be allowed to buy into the team? I know none of us know this for certain. What would be your expectation on that?
I think there might be there might be interest. It's kind of weird. We saw Mark Davis sell a piece of the Aces to Tom Brady.
Right.
He tried to do it with the Raiders,
Right.
and that kind of he fell into kind of a
On a
well,
discount.
yeah, at a discounted rate. That was kind of problematic. And I would not be surprised if there was some local interest. A guy who actually used to own the AAA team, who's very popular in our market, is Derek Stevens. He owns Circa, which is
Mm-hmm.
very high profile sports betting hotel with their famous pool and sports watching area. I mean, it's a pretty impressive downtown property. Derek is a huge sports fan. In fact, it's kind of funny. When I saw Derek at some events, I kind of half jokingly went up to Derek. I said, "Hey, are you going to buy the Oakland? Are you going to buy the A's now and get that new stadium built here in Vegas?" And I think people here in Las Vegas would probably welcome
Hmm.
like a Derek Stevens involved. There've been other names. The Fertitas names have cropped up with an NFL team, but the Raiders kind of handled that. Dana White's kind of a fascinating guy. He's involved with, I think he has like a bull and PBR, and he mentioned that he has an interest in having some kind of MMA event at the Sphere, which is like the latest. That's another thing, Brody. People are the Sphere has gobbled up a lot of bandwidth in public space
Right.
in terms of people's attention.
And
So
expectations
again,
too.
the Fontainebleau is also being built. That's supposed to be open soon. There's still a lot of buzz on a lot of other stuff going on, and believe it or not, it's hard to even mention this, but the UNLV football team is getting a lot of attention. They're 5-1. They play Colorado State at home on Saturday, and I know it's not a big deal, across the country about going to a bowl game, but
Yeah.
it is for UNLV. They've had a pretty bad team for so long, and I think they've been to a one bowl game. I think it may have been in 2013, perhaps. So anyway, the point is, there's just so much other sports stuff that a lot of the A's stadium and buzz has been drowned out and has been really diluted in just this particular window of time.
You mentioned earlier the Sphere, and that's captivated people too, right? Their expectations maybe set a new bar for what entertainment in Vegas has to be. Mark Bedane was talking the other day about what he and his group hope to bring to an NBA arena, and that a baseball stadium can't be cookie cutter in Las Vegas. What does
That's
this?
true.
What does the stadium? Two things. What does the stadium have to be, and then also to captivate the fans, what does the team have to be in terms of headliners, in terms of payroll? My point is that the expense of what the A's are doing, not only building a stadium, but having to furnish it with the proper talent, this is going to be an expensive venture.
Right. So the context of Mark Badane's comment I mean, there has to be explained that he obviously was the former Raiders president,
Right.
and he and Mark Davis were not exactly on good terms with the Athletics
Right.
at the Coliseum.
Right.
So that needs to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
But he raised a good point. It's legitimate. You definitely can't build a cookie cutter sports venue or entertainment venue in this market. Sadly, it's done in the residential sphere. There's a lot of like cookie cutter subdivisions out there in Las Vegas, but when it comes to sports and entertainment, it's going to have to be unique. It's going to have over the top glitz to it. The funny thing is, my point is the Vegas Golden Knights had a very amusing, attention grabbing banner raising ceremony when the banner came out of a oversized slot machine that was rolled onto the ice for the home opener. And, that goes to the point that I don't know if I mean, Fisher and the culture of that team much better than I do. They're going to have to kind of look at this outside the box from an entertainment standpoint and get, you can go over the top in Las Vegas. I get back to my point that Las Vegas is an outlier market. You can do stuff in this market that's done politically, economically, culturally, that you just could not get away in doing in other markets.
Sure.
And the question will be, are the Athletics up to the task, in terms of that kind of over the top, kind of, crazy
showmanship.
Almost, I mean, some people, it's kind of funny. Some people thought it's classist, but Las Vegas doesn't mind that. I mean, they're not here to impress you. They're here to entertain and amuse you at a very high level. So, that baseball park is going to be at the very heart of the identity of this market, which is the Strip. I think people have to understand from outside the market, it's being built at literally one of the two signature intersections in our market, Flamingo and Las Vegas Boulevard and Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard. Granted, the Tropicana Hotel was not in a Bellagio Wynn kind of Venetian category, but it's a very high profile location. The Oakland Athletics franchise, they're going to have to be a little outside the box in the creativeness, in the entertainment, and even architecture of the building. This is kind of like, it's kind of like an NFL team. It's kind of like if the Giants or the Jets went into Manhattan and said, "Hey, we want to build a stadium at Times Square."
Right.
That's the equivalent. That's the equivalent of what the A's are trying to do. Right. At Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard. And like I said, most cities like New York and the Bay Area, they have a lot of public needs and public amenities. Las Vegas is, they think, that they're an outlier. I know I've used the word a few times now, but they're not they don't do things by the book.
Yeah.
So, to your point, Brody, this franchise is going to be challenged to come up with something very, very over the top, very impressive, very attention grabbing, especially when you have like stuff like the Spheres coming online.
Yeah, those next renderings are going to count for twice as much as they probably need to. Last thing, Alan, is I mentioned the team that they need to field. Now, we've seen the A's over time win with a relatively low payroll. They're they're the only major league team that's never had a $100 million payroll team in any season. That's amazing that they're the only ones. So they can win by not spending top dollar, but I don't know if it's ever been proven they can sustain success without actually starting to pay for it. And just looking ahead, I mean, right now the A's are about $100 million short of the median MLB payroll. I mean, it is the expectation that when they're in Las Vegas, they have to at least be in the top half of paying teams. I mean, is there any other way you could see it that they're not?
Well, I mean, Fisher has said that, the stadium is needed to become economically more viable and relevant. And, he, I think, has been quoted as saying that he will be in the position to, quote unquote, buy more expensive players and field a more competitive team. What's interesting, Brody, is that we have a kind of a forerunner. We have a little foreshadowing in the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders came from the same stadium and market, and they did make the playoffs 2 years ago, but last year was pretty miserable, 6-11. This year, it's kind of weird. They have kind of a mediocre team, but they've split their 6 games. And the point is that they still make money, and that's kind of interesting. Even though the team is mediocre, the franchise value skyrocketed thanks to their move to Las Vegas. They were able to get when the A's open up their ballpark, they are going to see a skyrocketing amount of revenue from corporate partnerships. I would expect corporate partnerships to amount to, by 2028, Brody,
Uh-huh.
at least 350 to 400 million dollars in, in new sponsors right there. The value of the, again, congratulations, state legislature. You not only skyrocketed the value of the Raiders franchise, you also increased the value of the athletics franchise because of the new ballpark that will be presumably come online in
Yeah.
2028. But the interesting thing is that the one thing that maybe the ownership of the athletics have going is that, you know, what we've seen in Las Vegas is that in the form of the Raiders, that even if your team is not winning, you can still sell out the seats. That is what we saw last year,
Right.
and make a lot of money. They might not be your fans per
Right.
se,
Right.
but there's bodies in the seats.
Right.
They're paying for parking. They're paying, for food and beverage, which
Hotels.
in the case of the athletics, Brody, is very important because that's where the public revenues will be coming from
Right.
to pay off the bonds. Clark County, I think, is on the hook for what, $120 million. And they are relying on this quote unquote tax district,
Right.
which is this tiny little 9-acre stamp size, little district that is, they're going to charge stuff on, I think, 17 different items,
Right.
different categories, and they're going to need people. And the weird thing is, here in Nevada, I don't think money is raised off the sales of the tickets per se. I don't think there's a ticket charge that goes to the public coffers. There's always debate in the state legislature, and the teams and the entertainment menus always fight it, and they've done it successfully. They've defeated bills that would have added a charge to tickets. So if that ticket does not have a public charge on it, they're going to have to rely on a lot of tourists, which mean that, they're coming to the game. They might not need to have the athletics win games. They're just going to come there for a good time. They're going to, I guess there's a new Tropicana building that's supposed to be built on that site. And people will be stumbling out of the MGM Grand and New York, and Excalibur, and they'll be going to the athletics baseball park. But those will be tourists; they won't be locals. And I guess to your point is that the athletics might not have to win games. The Raiders have not won. I mean, they have not made any big push toward a championship. And what's happened to them? Mark Davis has seen the value of that
Right.
team skyrocket, even with a mediocre one-loss record.
Right.
So, if that's your foreshadowing, I would expect Fisher to pay more than he is right now for players. But here's just to throw this out there to you, the locals have their baseball team. They're the Aviators. They're the AAA team of the team, and they're the AAA team of the Athletics, and they play in a very, very nice 10,000 seat stadium in suburban Summerlin. It's easy in, easy out. The parking is free, and I got to tell you,
It's competition.
no one's willing to go on record, but there has been grumbles from some of the workers there that they are a little upset that there's a major league team, especially athletics, that could take a bite out of their revenues.
Yeah. It's hard to see how they'll do well in all of this, if and when it all happens. Alan, you were, again, one of the first people I talked to, and as we're getting closer here to maybe some decisions, it's been great to communicate with you over time, and I want to remind everybody, lvsportsbiz.com. You've got the hat on, but it's in the description here. We'll fully link to it, but follow you on social and the website, and you've been doing a great job documenting all of this from a firsthand perspective. So I think that was already known.
I really enjoyed talking with you,
people.
Brody. I think you serve such a vital role. I really respect the fact that you are part of the broadcast team, but you also provide the kind of analysis and evaluation of what's going on that is just so necessary and required in this era of sports and politics and business and stadiums and ticket prices and sponsorships. It can get kind of, just to connect the dots is a challenge, and
Yes.
you do a great job at that. So I really appreciate the work you do in the Bay Area.
Thanks, Alan. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, be well, Brody.